Okay. Hi, Dr. McClain. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I was reading through your bio before we got on, and a couple of points I wanted to bring up right away. The first one was that you were a professional boxer in Argentina. Is that correct?
Can't you tell by my nose? I didn't have much of a defense either. Actually, I was a kickboxer down in Argentina.
A kickboxer. All right. How did you get there? Tell us a little of that story.
Well, I was in the gymnasium in Key Biscayne, Florida, and the fellow came up to me. His name was Hector Echavarria, and he just came over and said, "Hey, would you consider fighting me?" And this is back in the day where, okay, those were fighting words. I figured, okay, well, I guess I'm about to get in a fight here. And I looked at him as such, I guess, and he said, no, 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 no. I mean, a professional fight, because he had seen me. There was a dojo across from the gym. He'd seen me fighting. And anyway, long story short, we set up our first exhibition together, and that's how it all started from there.
Okay. So, did you lose to him?
I did. Yes.
So you went all the way from Florida to Argentina to fight this guy, and then you lost. Is that basically what happened?
Well, remember, it was an exhibition fight, the first one and the second one with him, actually. And I think I outweighed him at the time by at least 20 pounds, which is part of the reason why I think we had to have an exhibition listed, and also so I wouldn't get shot. If everyone were stupid to bet upon it, it's their own fault if you're betting on an exhibition. And I guess I should leave it at that, right? But actually, there was another twist to it. The idea was to go down there and have this fight, and we would use part of the scenes. It's part of the fight in scenes for a movie that he had planned. And from there, I did a lot of movie and some television down in Argentina. So there was more of a plan than just to have this fight staged.
Oh, I see. So you were kind of doing some stunt work.
Well, stunts, yeah, I was doing my own stunts, but I was one of the principals in a show called, or movies that were entitled Los Exterminators. And they included, he was famous and he's now famous too, Guillermo Francella, Emilio Lisi. These are all Argentine estrellas, as they would say, stars down there. But it was a blast. We did a few movies that were sort of knockoffs of, Schwarzenegger and Von Damme films. They have a unique cinema down there where they combine drama with action and comedy all in one movie. So it was very unique, but it was a lot of fun.
So was that the end of your boxing career?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to do it for fun. I trained underneath a guy named Bojack. I don't know if you ever remember him. He was a lightweight champ in the 40s. His real name was Sidney Walker, but one of my all-time heroes, actually. And according to him, I was never ready to fight. No one really was. By the time he reached his 70s, no one was tough enough. Our generation wasn't tough enough. And part of that's true, I would argue, because if you see some old footage of Bo, uh, he was one of the toughest guys I ever met. You know what suicide is in the ring, right? If you wrap your arms around the top or any of the ring ropes, top would keep you off the floor. That's basically saying no matter what you do to me, I'm not going down. And so as long as back then in those days, as long as you were still upright, your opponent could beat you literally to death. Bo was one of those type of guys that just wasn't going to have anything to do with losing. Although he did trade the lightweight championship of the world a couple times with another fella back in the day.
Interesting. The name sounds very familiar. Um, I have to.
Because Mike Tyson, who fancies himself a historian of boxing, in one of his videos, he said that Bojack was pound for pound probably the greatest fighter ever.
I have to look him up. I'm sure there's all
You
kinds of
should.
stuff online to
He's a
read.
wonderful guy.
Yeah. Also, it says that you were accepted to go to medical school at age 37.
Yes, highly unlikely, right?
Well, I mean, I didn't know that there isn't an age limit per se, is there? I mean, you can go whenever you are qualified to go, right?
Ostensibly, yes, but I had more than one person tell me, sort of behind the scenes, "Hey, look, it's nothing against you. But you have to understand you're 37, and for the state schools anyway, like UCLA, USC, your benefit to them is very limited because they're going to subsidize your education and subtract, 15 years of service. You're not a good deal from a business standpoint. So while I was waitlisted at one university like that, my chances weren't good outside of private schools.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I guess it begs the question, why did you wait till you were 37, or was it?
Believe it or not, this is my ninth career. You could blame it on ADHD. You could blame it on just having a great time growing up, and maybe even sort of a fear of not being able to follow my passion. I really enjoyed, we'll call it medicine, starting off with what I read when I was a child, nutrition books, and I was fascinated with your ability to control your health with just the food you ate. Remember, I'm a 60-year-old guy, so that was kind of new news back then. And then with several injuries and sport, I always had an interest in it, but I was always doing something else, whether it was accounting or I was a manufacturer of clothing. I was a lifeguard. I was all kinds of things. And then I had to cut to the chase. I had a daughter on the way, and I said, you know what? You need to settle in on something you're going to do for a long time, because whatever you decide on, arguably you're going to be stuck with it because you got to provide for a family now. So across the country drive on I-10, I thought and thought about it. I said, you know what do you really want to do? I really want to be a doctor. I've always thought it was a cool thing to do and figured, let's do it now. And here we are.
So you made it.
Yeah, despite all the odds. And I have to be honest, or candid, everyone told me, oh, you're not going to get in. And then, that's the medical school. And then, oh, you're not going to get into a residency program. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. And fortunately for my personality, that worked, because then I made sure I was going to get in there, whatever it took.
So what is your area of expertise? Is it nutrition?
No, I would say probably what we call bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Although, as you can imagine, and this is not pumping my own stock up, but as a 37-year-old starting this journey, I would say I was a little bit more open to certain things and more attentive to certain things because I had lived a little bit longer. And I don't think you'd find too much argument with that from anyone who's in medical school now or 20 years after they went to medical school. You have a different mindset naturally. And that helped. I'd gone to traditional Chinese medicine school first and saw some of the advantages as well as some of the flaws to that. As I said, I'd been in sport and gone through a lot of injuries myself. So I had a self-interest there that had propelled me along the way to do a lot of research. And it just became a natural thing to get into what I practice. There's no specialty for it officially. Regenerative medicine, which I think of as really just optimizing health. And of course, sports medicine, there is a specialty there, but I guess you could say I use the term loosely here because I do not have a specialty in sports medicine per se, but with my background and learning along the way, which people forget is a lot of what really comes out of a medical practice. You get the ticket to practice with the basics, but then what you learn along the way is really what you end up practicing. So I hope that answers your question. That's how I fell into it, if you will. I really just, as Joseph Campbell would say, I followed my bliss. Ended up being optimizing health and working on some of the injuries and trying to help, get athletes back on their feet.
Well, are athletes your primary patients?
Actually, no, they're a lot of fun, although they're very difficult because the typical pro athlete or elite amateur, or whatever you want to call it, really doesn't have that much room for improvement, right? They're already at the top of their field. And so it makes it more difficult to squeeze that last, 1 or 2%, if that, out of them. Most of my patients are people that, for example, have done well in, say, business. Maybe were college athletes and then said, okay, now I have to buckle down and provide for a family. And they spent 20 years working for, say, Goldman Sachs on the floor, which, anybody in the business world knows will take a lot out of you. It's a lot of work. You don't get much sleep and it taxes you. You dig into your reserves, as I say. And then they say, okay, well, now I've made it. Now what do I want to do? And they want to get back to their old self, or even better, and get back to exercising properly. And I guess you could argue being around long enough to spend their hard-earned money. And so those are a lot of my patients. But at the same time, I have a lot, probably the largest group I have in my practice is law enforcement officers. And this is a group that you could argue needs the help. These are guys that are typically and gals, they're pretty selfless and take care of themselves and their health last. So I see a lot of those men and women too. So it's a mixed bag.
So your book is called Cheating Death and the New Science of Living Longer and Better. It says it's going to be released in January 2023. Who's the book geared towards? Is it geared towards everybody, or do you have a specific kind of market in mind?
I think I can narrow it to be, a little fewer than everybody, in the sense that really the reason for writing the book was realizing that there was a lot of ignorance. I kind of wrote it for the younger me, if you will, now that I think about it, in the sense that I was interested. And then, starting with Adele Davis's book when I was 11, this nutrition book to which I was referring, was fascinated, and I just didn't know what was out there. And so it was thank goodness for the internet, because that really rapidly increased my knowledge base, because I could access these things. The idea of the book was the same. Hey, let's get this out there. Let's let people know what is available, not necessarily in the mainstream, through a health maintenance organization, for example, because, without starting any trouble, I mean, that's a business base largely. And you say, well, all medical practices are, businesses, right? But there's a different flavor with certain practices over others. I'll leave it at that. And so you might be limited as to your options because you're with one of these, again, I'll call it a health maintenance organization. And I want people to know, hey, there are other options. And yeah, you might have to dig into your mattress money to get something done. But I think, and I can say this, having been a CPA, I'm presumably honest and conservative, right? Everyone I've ever met would trade quality of life over quantity of life. And before I let that go, without any hesitation, I would argue that almost invariably, if not invariably, that's not the case. In other words, you're not trading longevity for quality of life. Well, you're actually improving your what we call health span, both your length of life as well as your quality while you're on the planet, with most of the options, if not all the options out there these days.
Okay, is this a self-help type book?
In some ways, yeah, there are some do-it-yourself tricks. For example, I've got a $250,000 plus cryotherapy machine in my office where you can jump in for 3.5 minutes and then get back to work. Most people aren't going to want to put that in their own home, even if they could afford it. So there's some tips about, I think I used Amazon to get an ice maker for $159.99, and you can get 6 pounds of ice generated in a short time and use your bathtub. So there's some things like that will approximate at least some form of cryotherapy. And then in the other sense, do it yourself is, be your own best health advocate. So don't just listen to your doctor, although I'm not saying to ignore your doctor, but look at the other options that are out there. I hope most of which are included in the book, although that's going to change as medicine changes very rapidly. And do your own research and then bring it to your doctor or the appropriate place and take control of your health in that sense.
Well, I think on that, we're going to have to wind this down. We've kind of just run out of time. Thank you so much for coming on this show. Do you have a website you want to give out for the book, or a personal one?
Sure. It's PSRmed, Papa Sierra Romeo Med.com. And I think on the website there, we have all the other links to our different locations and our contact telephone, et cetera, as well as email.
Okay, great. Well, Dr. McClain, it was nice meeting you, and best of luck. The book, again, comes out in January, and it'll be available through the website as well as probably Amazon and all those outlets.
Yes, it's already on Amazon right now for, I think they call them pre-sales or
Pre-order,
pre-orders. But
yeah.
Douglas, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.